All right, this is part three of the women's movement. We're going to look at what did the women's movement achieve. And so your learning objective is to identify the campaign methods that were used by now and to judge whether equal equality legislation was successful. So this is an example of a billboard. It says, if it were a lady, it would get its bottom pinched. And then some woman spray painted, if this lady was a car, she'd run you down. So this is showing you the changing attitude of women towards the sexism which was expressed by men. So we have equality legislation. So in 1963, we have passage of the Equal Pay Act, and this is in part based on the work of Eleanor Roosevelt and President Kennedy's uh, establishment of a panel to like look into women at work, and it made it illegal to pay women less than men. And in 1964, the Civil Rights Act made it illegal for employers to discriminate on the grounds of sex. So these are two, uh, you know, victories for the National Organization of Women and just women in general. However, in both cases, passing a law was not enough to change the sexist attitudes and the behaviors of society. Okay, so it's 2020. It's illegal to pay women less than men. Is there still are women still paid less than men? Yes, in some cases, definitely. Um, are women still discriminated against based on the fact that they're women? They sure are. Okay, so it's tough. However, is it as pervasive today as it was in the 1960s? No. And part of the reason is because of the advancements made by organizations like now. So in the late 1960s, the women's liberation movement, known as feminists, they therefore began to protest more directly than just seeking legislative change. So you have a task. I want you to look at the table and the sources that are found on page 106 and 107 of the Orange Book, which is, don't worry about the Orange Book, it's the PDF I'm going to give you. And I want you to answer questions 1 to 3, okay? So that's one of your assignments. The women's liberation movement. So now it was created in '66 by Betty Friedan, which we've spoken about, and the aim of the group was to achieve full equality with the sexes. Okay, between the sexes rather. However, the women's liberation movement was the name given to those who had far more radical aims than now. So we've got the women's liberation movement. This is separate from now, and they were also known as feminists. So we have two groups, similar aims, different methods, both called the same thing, which is feminists. Now, extreme feminists, they wanted nothing to do with men. Most wanted signs of male supremacy to be removed, which is called the patriarchy, including male control of employment, politics, and the media. Now, this is similar if you think about it with the civil rights movement. You've got Martin Luther King, right? He has got one way of trying to overcome the racial discrimination that African Americans were facing. And then you have another group that's more radical, like Malcolm X or the Black Panthers, who they want, like at one point, Malcolm X actually called for a complete separation of black society from white society. So these are processes which naturally occur. Now, some examples of protests that occurred were some extreme feminists, they believe that not wearing makeup was an act of protest against male supremacy, so that they didn't put on blush or mascara or lipstick. Some even burned their bras, and they like, if you think about this, right? The men are burning their draft cards. So here you have a woman burning her bra. And this was, they viewed the wearing of a bra as a symbol of male domination. So in 1968, others picketed the Miss America beauty contest in Atlantic City, and they crowned a sheep as being Miss America in its place. Here you have an example of like a woman who's marked up as if she's like a piece of a cattle cut up for consumption. And they argued that the contest that was held, which has a bikini part of it, that it degraded the position of women, that they were more than just eye candy. So here's some examples of women protesting. Okay, you got police officers, you got the public looking. The greater public is not in the same place as these women. These women are very cutting edge for the time that they live. Now, there's reactions to the feminist movement. So the extreme feminists in the movement, they did a lot of harm to the movement because they, even though they were a minority, they became the identifiable group that everyone saw. So if you said that you were a feminist, then that would mean that people would assume that you hated men and that you burned your bras, and that might not be the case. Maybe what you were as a feminist, you viewed women as needing political, social, and economic equality with men. So it's one term, can be determined in different ways. So extreme actions and protests, they brought ridicule to the movement, and it made it difficult for men and other women to take the issue of equality seriously. And the key issue of equal pay and better job opportunities were therefore they're forgotten about. So the women's rights movement, which is the third movement, you got civil rights movement, you got the students' rights movement, women's rights movement. The civil rights movement had a lot of success. The students' rights movement had a lot of success. The women's rights movement had early successes, but then it begins to sort of fall apart. Okay? And that's it for that. Thanks, guys.